In this video, you will learn how to solve percent problems with the percent equation and the percent proportion. There are three pieces to every percent problem. The part is represented by the letter A, the whole represented by the letter W, and the percent, which we will represent with the letter P. In a percent problem, any of these three pieces might be missing, but we will know the other two. The percent equation is part equals percent times whole. And the percent proportion is part over whole equals percent over 100. Here we can see what all of the pieces of the equation represent. A represents the part, the P represents percent, and the W represents the whole. Now we can also think of the equal sign as the word is, and the times sign as the word of. That comes in handy when we try to take a word problem and turn it into an equation. Example number 1. 40 pounds is what percent of 75 pounds? First, we have to determine what part of the equation each of the pieces of the word problem will be. This first one lines up exactly with the percent equation. 40 pounds is the part, is our equal sign. What percent is the percent? And since it says what percent, that's our unknown. And 75 is the whole. It's really easy to figure out which part of a question is the whole because it comes after the word of every single time. So let's replace all the parts of the equation with the values that we know from the word problem. Let's rewrite this equation in a way that we recognize. Usually an equation like this, where it says 40 equals P times 75, is going to be written like this. 40 equals 75P. So I switched around the 75 and the P, the percent, because normally we see multiplication in algebra with the variable after the number or the coefficient. Now we solve the equation. 75P, we need to get P by itself, so we just divide both sides by the 75. 40 divided by 75 is 0.5333333333. The 3 goes on forever. We can write it as 0.53 with a line over the 3 because that indicates that 3 repeats forever. But when we change it to a percent, we need to move the decimal over 2 places to the right to make it 53.3 repeating percent. So 40 pounds is 53.33% of 75 pounds, which makes sense because it's a little bit more than half of 75. Now let's try the same problem, but use the percent proportion. We need to put the part over the whole, so we'll replace the A with the 40, replace the W that represents whole with the 75. Now the percent is our unknown. That's what we don't know in this problem. So that means we need to solve this proportion for P. All we need to do is multiply the two corners we know, 40 times 100. That gives us 4,000. Then we divide by the other number, which is 75. 4,000 divided by 75 is 53.3 repeating. Now we just tack the percent sign onto the end. Notice we didn't have to move the decimal in this problem because the 100 in the proportion takes care of that itself. When you do the equation, you'll need to take care of the decimal. When you do the proportion, it's all figured in. Example number 2, 7% of what length is 200 feet? Now we're going to solve both ways on the same slide so you can see both together. First, I'm going to make sure that I know what piece is the percent, what's the part, and what's the whole. 7%, well, that's obviously the percent. 7% of what length? Well, because it says what length, that's our unknown. We don't know the length. And it comes after that word of. Anything after the word of is the whole in the problem. 7% of what length is 200 feet. Remember, is stands for the equal sign, and 200 feet is going to be the part. We wrote down earlier that the percent equation is part equals percent times whole, where part is percent of whole. But the awesome thing about the equation is that you can just write it down in the order that it is in the problem. We just have to use the of and the is to help us know what signs to write. In this case, we have the percent first. The whole is in the middle, and the 200, the part, is at the end. We have to pay attention to the of and the is. So we have percent of, or times, whole is, or equals, part. We can replace percent in our equation with the 0.07. Be sure that you change the percent to a decimal or a fraction form. Then replace the part with 200. And we also want to replace of with a times sign and is with an equal sign. Switch the word whole to just a W. We don't need the whole word whole to represent that. And we can rewrite the equation to look more like we recognize it. 0.07 W equals 200. Now we need to solve for W. Divide both sides by 0.07. And we get 2,857.143, and it just goes on and on. Let's see if that makes sense in this situation. 7% of 2,857 and some more feet is 200 feet. So does it make sense that 200 is 7% of 2,857? 7% is a very small amount. And yes, 200 is a very small amount of 2,857. So our answer makes sense. Now let's try this with a proportion. Remember, the part is 200, the whole is our unknown, and the P is 7. Remember that in this case, with a proportion, the 100 takes care of your moving decimal for you. You don't need to change it to 0.07 in this case. Multiply the two corners we know, 200 times 100, giving us 20,000, and then divide by the other number, 7. And we should get the same exact answer we got on the left side, 2,857.143, and on and on and on feet. And example number 3. What is 40% of 360? Remember that the number after of is going to be your whole. We have the percent, obviously, and the what is the missing part. So we'll solve this in two ways again, with a percent equation and then with a percent proportion. Our percent equation is part is percent of whole. Part equals percent times whole. In this situation, it's written in the same order. But really, it doesn't matter that much what order the actual percent equation is in. You can just follow how it's written in the word problem as long as you use is for equals and of as times. So A is our unknown part equals 0.40 times 360. We just replaced each piece with the actual values from the word problem. Don't forget to change your percent to a decimal or fraction form. So our equation now is A equals 0.40 times 360. Well, that's easy. We don't really have to do much solving. We just have to punch this in the calculator and get our answer. The answer is 144, but let's make sure it makes sense. 144 is 40% of 360. 40% is a little bit less than half. So does it make sense that 144 is a little less than half of 360? Well, let's see. 2 of the 144s would be 288. So 288 is a little bit less than 360. Yeah, makes sense. Now we can solve it with a proportion. Part goes on top. That's our unknown. We use A to represent it. 360 is the whole, goes on the bottom of part. Then we always put the percent over 100. So A over 360 equals 40 over 100. Multiply the opposite corners that we know. 360 times 40, 14,400. Now divide that by the other number, 100. We get 144, the same answer we got when we solved this with the. Now you know how to solve percent problems with the percent equation and the percent proportion. Thanks for watching.